My name is Tom. I'm co-founder of Nordoon, where we employ AI agents to automate supply chain operations, in particular sales, procurement, logistic, and finance in manufacturing, wholesalers, logistic companies, distributors. So today we have with us a special guest, as always. This time, Lukas Pachinger, with extensive experience in regulated industries, working in supply chain in particular, end-to-end supply chain. Before we jump into more details, just to briefly describe what we can expect from today. So first of all, we're gonna discuss a bit what are the differences between regulated industries and non-regulated industries, just to kind of get warmed up, and then continue on, understanding or discussing how to get started with AI in this industry. So should we focus more on strategy or ROI cases? And then also take a closer look at pitfalls that we can, get on our way when it comes to implementing AI, as well as to have a summary of what we learn and how to start. So we would like you to participate and be part of this webinar. So on your right-hand side, there is a chat. So please post your questions or your remarks, comments there. So Lukas and I will make sure to make it as part of our discussion on the way, instead of waiting to the very end and try to answer that. So we can make it more conversational. So I think we can start. We're all set. And Lukas and I know each other for a while. We've been exchanging a lot of thoughts on the supply chain tech, about the processes, about how to get started in enterprise environment and settlement. And I'm really excited for having you here. So first of all, I would really like you to have a short introduction to the audience. Lukas, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Lukas Pachinger. I spent most of my working life in pharmaceutical industry, which is a highly regulated industry, as you may know. I spent 20 plus years in international corporations in, let's say, smaller, large scale, or even global multinational organizations, working in finance, working in commercial, working in supply chain and business transformational type of activities, and finding on the way, more like in every single country, a new solution to the same old problem. So it is an experience that is, let's say, cross-functional in nature, and I basically spent a lot of time internationally through audit and other engagements. So finally, I'm landing with this industry in transformational roles in supply chain, and specifically here, the cross-functional elements between, let's say, the operational parties that constitute the enterprise operating model. So I've been doing this in joint venture and global deployments and mergers and dissolutions, but also in just digital transformation type of things. Today, I'm self-employed advisor since 2022, and indeed, I'm going back with Tom on almost 3 years now. Back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lukas, for that introduction. And I think like we can get started right away. So you put some really nice cues for me. So first of all, talking about regulated industry, right? So on the high level, based on really general understanding, the complexity of it comes through regulation. And that means usually, what kind of tools you can choose, what kind of people you employ, and how you go about developing products and so forth. So can we talk about this a bit more from your perspective, being in different roles? How does it change, and compared to also what you're doing now, when you can see a bit more wider spectrum of companies, not just regulated?
Yeah, well, the pharmaceutical industry, to start with, is obviously regulated because of the nature of what it does, right? So it is providing healthcare, molecule development in biologics and pharmaceuticals, which obviously be injected or administered into patients, into human beings at some point in time. So that mandates a high attention to quality, and not only quality, but process control. You need to be 100% repetitive. So the regulations that apply to this industry come mostly from the aspect of making sure that there is no unnecessary harm to individuals. Right? So with this, there is a good amount of process description mandated by the legislation, and not enough that it is mandated to process document, but there are different kind of regulations globally, regionally, and even locally, which need to be adhered to. So compliance with these regulations is obviously one of the critical tasks that make this industry so special.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, but working in these industries, right? So, based on your experience, how to go about innovation, right? So one level is definitely the product, but then it's also operations, right? So maybe we can touch that, right? So in previous roles, you had a lot of experience, setting up the end-to-end processes in supply chain, connecting different departments into a whole structure and organization to be faster, more efficient. And one of those, I guess, measures is also, using AI, right? So what is basically how to get started in that kind of environment?
Yeah, so good question, Tom, because obviously the question is, if I be honest, I have been hearing from mostly smaller suppliers of technology solutions, well, this is a regulated industry, we cannot touch this, we don't consider pharmaceuticals or other regulated industries being a suitable client for us because of the regulations, right? So I think it is about knowledge. It's about knowing what the regulations are, what they really say, and where do they apply, right? So it's not like the pharmaceutical industry is a no-touch AI environment. Absolutely not. But it is important that one realizes that the AI technology, wherever deployed or whatever kind of automation tools are being deployed, need to support or need to adhere to those regulations. So that makes it, let's say, a number one good preparation step, so that one understands clearly what you're expecting from AI to do and where it touches these regulated specific environments.
Makes sense. So that means, but from the perspective of making changes and setting up the end-to-end process, right? So based on your experience, how did you go about, right? So how did you set up? And then if I understood correctly, usually you look at it like you put AI just as a function into that maybe broader picture. So
yeah, so in my specific case, I think digital maturity was the guiding principle, right? So I hear it also every now and then that AI is perceived as the silver bullet, the panacea that is solving all your problems overnight, right? And we all know that this is not entirely true. So there are many steps that need to be taken to get from an even well-composed enterprise operating model, even system supported, to an AI level of, let's say, integration, right? So typically that maturity entails that you start with data management, right, and governance to have a solid quality of data. You digitize, you digitalize, you get connected, you make things visible as they are, right? You then go with that visualization, creating your digital twins, which give you a leverage almost in real time. And then you start finally to touch artificial intelligence with robotics, automation, advanced analytics, machine learning, and eventually cognitive supported tools and technologies. So jumping over some of these steps too quickly without knowing, without defining, and without scoping properly might harm actually the operations more than they actually take benefit from. So it is about careful preparations, and we find, let's say, good examples of positive and actually successful AI implementations in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, but we could also argue, right? So things are changing a bit, and I would love your take on this one, right? So because of abundance of AI solutions and accessibility of, let's say, LLMs nowadays, which are being commoditized, that we can expect to have this piece of technology and models in every solution on all the levels, right? So for instance, what we are doing on just, at Nordoon, we're trying to use LLMs to clean up the data and automate processes. And this is on the very edges where you start to collect data and make sure that your ERP is single source of truth, so to speak, right? So
Yeah.
do you think this has changed from, let's say 10 years, 15 years ago?
I don't think it's changed from its purpose, from its idea, but it is massively changed by the means of how you can implement and what you can accomplish, right? So while data scrutiny and data quality at the manual times was a cumbersome, a very time-consuming exercise, it is now real-time possible with the help of agents, with the help of AI technology. So the ways things have been deployed or are being deployed have dramatically changed, while the underlying reason why they have to basically be done, and data quality to be the ultimate driver, has, I think, still its validity.
Yeah, makes sense. So maybe also from your experience, right? How did you start with kind of these big projects when it's like end to end, right? So how do you put ROI on that, right? Is this just a strategic decision, or is this like, okay, there is a meticulous process defining the ROI and go through the standard procedures and saying, okay, this is a project we go after, or this is something we have to do, we have to change, we have to get ready for the future? Well, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was in kind of these transformational initiatives with the larger scale from raw materials procurement to patient dispensation, there was no blueprint that had it all and was basically complete to just be implemented and done and dealt with. But it asked, where are the low-hanging fruits? Where kind of systematic approach to data integration, interoperability, and therefore a connected environment that speaks end to end and is almost real time, create a massive benefit to the organization. These benefits are obviously value drivers that have different shapes and forms, right? So one cannot say, I go for the highest and the biggest and the boldest efficiency opportunity first, but it is advisable to start experimenting at small or reasonable scale and go function specific at the same time the company is developing a vision. What is it that the company wants to accomplish with AI as a whole? Right. So giving you value drivers, I mean, we can talk about operating effectiveness as one key driver, right? And you therefore can basically call out continuity, sustainability, reliability as objectives that you want to pursue with AI deployments or technology enhancements. Value optimization in general, because the more you see, the more alternative and solution proposals you get to see with AI's help, the more you can act on these kind of things. Collecting just data and visualizing data for sake of data is missing the objective, right? So you will have to have a firm take on what is the consequence of knowing and then implementing to drive value, right? Because let's face it, AI technology is an investment into the future, and that future is costing every corporation some money. And the return obviously need to be put against this kind of investment, but it will not come without a sharp understanding. What is it that I want to accomplish and where is my starting condition today?
So you say that basically, and so from that perspective, and also what you said before, so that the starting point is about understanding your processes today and where you want to be. So that sounds like, and being in different companies, that kind of sounds like a quite lengthy process, right? So what is your experience working through that? I guess connecting different departments in kind of end-to-end process.
Yeah, well, it is, let's say, not a one department that can drive a enterprise digital transformation, right? So it is a enterprise effort, and it need to be dealt with accordingly, which comes with defining a vision, clearly having in mind where is this journey of digital transformation taking us, and therefore how do we go about implementing it. So it requires leadership and sponsorship throughout the entire organization. It needs to be carried forward through, I would call it, cross-functional teams, and in the vision of, let's say, what do I want to see ultimately, right? So if I'm having my deployment teams, my solution teams single divisionally organized, then most likely I get a very good version of that digital truth for that one function or division, but most likely not end to end, knowing that potentially some commercial, to just give you an example, commercial information might be helpful to understand manufacturing, and vice versa. A research organization might want to know how the complexities lie in manufacturing. So it is a kind of environment that you need to be cross-functionally enabled. Enterprise change management, I think, goes without saying. To change an existing, a human-based process that is potentially not even digital into an AI-supported process comes with a massive change, right? That change is affecting people, it is affecting data sets, it's affecting, let's say, even the cadence and the intensity in which data being communicated from where to where. Right. So it is therefore requiring that change management is even more so holistically being taken care of. Right. So then timing and funding. There is a good time for digital transformation initiatives and there is a bad one. Right. So whenever the organization is chartered with other objectives of major scale, it is potentially not the right time to actually start a digital transformation process.
It sounds sounds sensible. So one of the things that we notice nowadays, because of all the change and promise from, AI, that a lot of C-levels now trying to say, okay, we have to do something, right? There is an urge or there is a fear of being left behind, right? So, and there is always a kind of a question whether to start from more of a strategic perspective or saying, okay, let's look for use cases where we can find great ROI. And usually we see, talking to different stakeholders in the companies, they feel kind of lost maybe in this space. So should they focus like on individual use cases, work really narrow, or should they start changing on many fronts, right? So what is, how did you go about that, right? For instance, from your how to balance those two?
Well, my personal opinion and experience is you cannot rock the boat with something complicated like AI deployments and go uncontrolled in every possible area at the same time. Number one, and I think Primoz, you have been highlighting this in the comments, it is that you also can harm the organizational effectiveness by distracting the organization with all these kind of tools, deployments, and potentially even failure, right? I mean, failing fast in a defined and confined environment is basically the way to go. Agile delivery on top of it, that means you need to start experimenting, but potentially not with the most prestigious, most deep and most complex process that you have, but you start experimenting with this kind of technology in a defined environment.
I agree with you. So, just kind of the message, getting started is the right one, but a kind of controlled environment. And maybe the other question connected to also the topic just before that, you mentioned like cross disciplinary teams. So also when you were building this, you were alone, and that means alone. So you kind of led that teams that were like exclusively internal, or did you also get some help like from consultants or from vendors? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so I think, like always, it is that you need to partner strategically and operationally. So not including your own organization in the future of your enterprise will basically result in a lower engagement in the future of your workforce. So the composition that we had was a mix out of external partners, out of consultancy and external advisory, keeping us honest to ourselves, but also helping with things that need to get done, like the status quo of the current operating model and developing the future organizational operating model. These kind of things require obviously a lot of work, which for many companies, there's not enough workforce to actually do that. But I give you an example. If you have an organization of 1,000 people and you go for 10% of headcount efficiency because of AI, put an ROI on it, you have 100 people that you can deploy actually doing things differently in the future. So there's a productivity element into it that you can actually leverage. So you can actually partner within the organization, lifting and freeing up organizational tasks that people don't need to do anymore, and therefore have time to actually jump on digital transformation project work.
That makes sense. So maybe just to go back to that cross kind of disciplinary team. So maybe just to understand, what was the ratio? Let's say internal team, you said consultants, advisors, maybe vendors. So what was the ratio? So was majority the internal team, and was just like a couple of guys that were, kind of outside world, make sure that we are not over promising ourselves something?
Yeah, I think in this one specific instance, it was the majority of the team was internal team. But again, from various different backgrounds, different experiences, different ages, different cultures, different geographies. So it was really a wider mix of capabilities and capacities that came together. And it is obviously to the benefit of having a rounded portfolio of projects that then kicked off and be implemented step by step, following a kind of technical, but also a logical roadmap. There are certain things that need to get done first, like the maturity ladder that I described a little bit earlier. So where you need to make sure that the foundational enablers to go digital are being fully accomplished and met before you get on with the next kind of chapter to build on that, right? So here, obviously, it is advisable to seek domain expertise. If you don't have domain expertise, you need to find domain expertise that is either internal talent or external resources.
Makes sense, right? So, and based on your experience, right, how to measure the success in addition to, like you said, okay, we have productivity gain, right? So this is just one, but like how can you tell that project is, successful? What is the time frame that you're measuring this? It's always troublesome when you're talking about, based on my experience, like a cross-disciplinary or cross-departmental measures. It's really hard to tell which one was the most successful, because you have a lot of influences from different departments. It's hard to tell which one was the dominant one, and how much credit you can allocate to individual one. So how can you go about that? Say, okay, this was very successful.
Yeah, well, number one is you start with a definition where your starting condition is, right? It's like on the open ocean. If you go sailing, you need to know where you started your journey from, meaning where your port was and where destination harbor is. Otherwise, navigating gets complicated, right? So in this sense, you need to have a fine understanding of your current environment, your processes, your people interactions, what people do to get the work done that is currently at stake. Select a certain element where you see there is value. If we could do things differently, scope and charter them properly, and do a test, do basically an experiment before you go for deployment of big scale, and see, first of all, has that kind of setup and this kind of deployment reached its endpoint? Can we confirm that that value was generated? Then you apply the same kind of logic and expose it to more business and see whether the promise of value is still holding true. When that is guaranteed, you can go for enhanced and, let's say, broader capability in deployment, right? But I think it is number one, understanding what the value is. Number two is where it depends and how AI is influencing that dependency, right? So are you pulling the right lever, so to speak? And if yes, do you have proof that you can repeat this? Is this a repetitive kind of value that you can generate?
Sounds absolutely right. So maybe kind of sum it up. So it sounds like this is a great effort. It sounds like, I wanted to ask about time, but it sounds like years. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it obviously depends whether you are a matured large-scale enterprise, right, with thousands of people, or whether you are a rather small enterprise with still relatively lean processes. Think about the end-to-end value chain of a pharmaceutical company, right, from research over manufacturing, over supply chain, then commercialization. And imagine this all to be in a digital frame. Yeah, a real-time digital twin of everything what you're doing. So this is not coming as a project that you can do in just a couple of weeks. I think we all agree to that. The question is, there is this fear of paralysis from the ever-changing capability landscape of AI, right? So AI as a capability is not stable. It is evolving constantly. So at some point in time, the companies need to overcome this kind of fear of paralysis and basically keep moving and get started somewhere. Otherwise, you're watching it and you're never part of it. So all to say, it will take years for large-scale operations, potentially even a decade, to get it all the way end to end through. But again, it also depends what is the vision of that enterprise as to what value artificial intelligence should represent to that specific organization.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for this insight. So maybe before we jump to the next topic, I wonder, you've seen a lot of digital transformations, right? Leading, these digital transformations or just, helping other companies. Is there a pattern on, one thing that, companies want to discard immediately? And in contrast to that, is there one that they want to, hold on? So is there like a pattern, or it's really depends? If something that like really popped out.
Yeah, I think what pops out is that over time, companies have developed, let's say, efficient, or let's say process environments, let's call it this way, process environments that potentially can be improved, right? And they have been designed with the capabilities that were there at the time, right? Looking backward from today's perspective, you might find way more intuitive, faster, leaner processes that can actually be deployed and, let's say, therefore course corrected. So these efficiencies coming from reorganization of existing processes, making the administration of the enterprise leaner, faster, more potent, that is one thing that stuck with me, because that is a relatively low-hanging fruit that apparently many companies are going for. Number two, it is also independent from most regulatory requirements. So you can actually start doing certain kind of work in this kind of field. And it is, let's say, relatively speaking, also a leaner investment model that you can foresee for that, right? So because there are many things that can be done in operational excellence, when the right tools come with the right process, with the right intention, which requires the willingness to change, right? Without willingness to change, you can deploy and throw tools as you wish, but they will not successfully develop the value and deliver the value.
So I guess that if I kind of summarize it, so it's kind of one thing that is usually they want to hold on is the processes they build, right? So it's really hard to get away from, right?
Yeah, well, at the same time, processes like we have discussed earlier on the pharmaceutical or biopharmaceutical environment are sometimes not at the discretion of just changing, but because they're part of the regulatory requirements and filings even. So the processes can just not be changed overnight to something else. So these kind of areas require even reapproval of certain processes by authorities.
Okay.
And hence, they need to be carefully evaluated first and then assessed for, is it feasible to do this kind of process change and revalidate whether it leads to the same controlled outcome.
That's kind of also answering or extending our conversation on the complexity, right? So that can be a major setback, I mean, in time when it comes to change management and adopting new processes and technologies. So thank you on that one. So maybe we can move on the next one. So we can see all the beautiful things from AI, but being part of the transformation team and implementing these technologies, we might touch some of the pitfalls, or during our discussion so far, where do things often go wrong? What did you experience in your experience, right?
Yeah, so I think I said it already a little bit earlier. So the unprecise understanding of AI, or a lower level built knowledge of artificial intelligence, right? So a blurred understanding of what it will result in and how it should look like, I think is one thing that is causing significant damage, or can cause significant damage, right? So a complete understanding of, let's say, how the current business is to be transformed is equally hazardous, right? So whenever there is no deep understanding of how to transform from the current state to the future state, it is basically sending the transformation team on a mission impossible, right? So there need to be a plan before you go. What other functional threats are out there? I think when you have systems that lack the interoperability, your data are not correct, you have, let's say, digital maturity that is not, let's say, there where it is. I hear a lot of typing right now, sorry.
No worries.
Then this is basically a potential threat for either value or even success of implementation or even testing. And from a management perspective, lack of ownership, wrong people, wrong time are typically the things that go wrong. And finally, the missing discipline and the governance to really pull through. Right? Once you start it, you should have, let's say, a very disciplined and organized approach that has a lot of control, how you actually deal with the transformation from non-digital into digital, and then in cognitive supported processes.
Okay, thank you for this input. So maybe from the, we hear that a lot. We hear a lot about silos, right? So it's not just departmental, it's also, let's say the tech stack that is available, right? So we have our ERPs, we have our Excel files that we all love, inboxes, people's minds, right? And until this point, humans were kind of superior in these roles, jumping the context, getting information from different sources and put it into a whole and make it a process. So, have you seen that before? Like, previously implemented previous technologies with the promise of automations, there were some limitations due to the specificity of the processes that are really hard to replicate if you don't have a bit more, you don't put more intelligence into it. And what seems promising, and I'm kind of see that across the startup world these days, is that agents with AI agents, at least with the promise and the first results, we see that would be the first time in history we would be actually able to automate, really automate also the exceptions, which in supply chain are more or less default, right? They're not just a long tail; they're every day's operation. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think exception management is obviously a daily business, and specifically in supply chain. So what AI should do, and is, I think, very well capable of doing, is enriching, number one, the time to get to a meaningful resolution. Number two, giving you options, right? So the first one is obviously cutting down the time it takes to analyze the problem statement and define or come up with a solution that is workable. So these workable solutions typically come with alternatives. You can do either or a multiple of either or, where artificial intelligence is, again, very powerful supporter, right? Where agents potentially can play a role, but all other forms of AI potentially have an equal powerful kind of outcomes. So here, I think it is really important to say, it depends heavily on how you want to go about it and which kind of technology you want to deploy where. so that you're not only in terms of time and better solution, but also alternatives, meaning scenario playing certain solutions to a certain problem statement, can be part of your daily routine of your normal business execution, right? So these things are not in contrast to daily operational tasks that people have been doing in the past. I don't remember that we had capabilities that allow us in the past to just explode a certain scenario on the totality of a manufacturing organization or of the commercial organization and receive meaningful feedback in meaningful time, meaning in rather minutes than weeks or months. And that, I think, is an eye-opening development.
Okay, so we have just an answer from Mahesh actually regarding the deployment of AI. It's exactly what I had in mind, right? So talking about regulations, right? So we said, okay, we have regulated processes. We might be stepping into the realm of unknown, right? Especially if you take AI agents by the definition, where we don't necessarily understand the process, right? So currently the state of art is more or less really AI agents with guardrails. So you have kind of predicted process workflows. They are a bit smarter when it comes to understanding and making decisions. But in the near future, we can expect saying, I want this, or this is what I have, and this is the result that I expect, but we don't know the path how to get there. So how do you see, let's say you mentioned pharma and biopharma, how's that gonna be regulated, since we might step into really unknown world?
Yeah, interesting point, because the European Union still is in the process of defining the use of AI in biopharmaceuticals, right? So there is still legislation in process. And obviously, as I said before, AI, whatever you're doing in kind of your operating processes, will need to support all the existing regulations anyways. So I cannot envision that the human supervising, and we see that here from Marishwar, the ask here in the chat is, once you have deployed AI capabilities, you still monitor and control them in some means or some ways or forms. So that obviously speaks to the quality requirement and the regulatory requirements, so that you have a real repetitive kind of way of executing your process, right? The ways of working still require a kind of definition, and it should not surprise you what the AI is coming up with. Right? So I think it gets dangerous whenever a human cannot comprehend anymore what AI has done. And that limits, I think that's part of another discussion, right? And, that speaks to the ethical requirements and the ethical stand that I think the industry has to also display. How far do we want to go with self-steering environments?
Also, it's about responsibility, right? At the end, it's still CEO signing and having the responsibility, right? If we don't understand what our workers, AI workers, are doing, it's also it's kind of not having a control over your ship. So that's also a thing that we're gonna have to discuss for in the future, as you said. So I think, like, we have just a couple of minutes. I think we can also talk about the benefits, right? So we kind of briefly mentioned those benefits. What we expect, like productivity gain, data quality improvements, leaner processes, kind of upskill of existing workforce to more, let's say, we call it from operators to orchestrators. Being, I mentioned, leaner organization, more competitive on the market, having better, greater products. Do you see any additional benefits going that direction from your perspective?
Sure. I think the element of time saving, I think the element of really seeing your entire organization through gives extraordinary value. I think as a closing remark, I would just say, define and really strategize your AI scope, secure your vision, right? Get your business ownership and your funding and everything what we said before. prepare the organization really to get excited about AI to come, not as a threat, but as your third arm, as the helping hand that enables you to work smarter, better, faster, more comprehensive, right? And communicate holistically. So it's not only a leadership topic, right? Start with tangible quick wins. We talked about them earlier, right? Following your design and your fine red line, what you want to accomplish with AI. But think Nike. I think the just do it paradigm, the experimentation is asking everybody to get the arms around it and get started, right? So otherwise we're bystanders.
I love it. I love it, Lucas. I think that's a great way to end our conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for listening and participating. So looking forward to our next episode. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you.